Good afternoon and welcome to another version of the CannaList Conversations. We have the pleasure of speaking with Peter Dolving from, and I'm going to probably kill this, so you can correct me, Peter, Svenska Verde. How was I supposed to say that?
Well, you can say it like it sounds, Verde.
Okay.
So, Verde.
You guys are based in Sweden. So
yes, we are.
Tell us a little bit, you're the founder. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and what you're working on?
Yes. Well, basically, we are a life science brand. We're more a product brand than anything else. This is a company that has been developed to the point we're at now for process over 10 years. So, like I said, it's all about pharmacy, and it's all about clinically tried products, and it's a lot less boring, I suppose, than much of the hubbub and the drama of parts of the market surrounding cannabis.
So these are medicinal products?
They are medicinal products. There will be mere cosmetics, and there will be also wellness products and also food products. But these are all far into the future, several years.
And looking into the future, what excites you about the European market? I'm assuming that's your target.
I think that what is developing here, what's evolving in the European market is completely different than the US expansion of cannabis. And I think that it is going to do the job. There's a whole point and a whole meaning that the world started approaching cannabis from a legal perspective. After 2009, and with all the material coming in from the World Health Organization and from the UN, it became very clear that we were dealing with the problems that came out of having this crazy situation with war on drugs, etc. Just causes just terrible division in society, polarity. It causes political division. It causes extreme, flight of capital from the taxed market. It's unsustainable. It's completely unsustainable. So what?
Yeah, and specifically, if you look even further back into the historical aspects of, why these prohibitions were enacted and who was behind them, right? So these were pharmaceutical companies looking to protect their interests. These were tobacco companies looking to protect their interests. So, when you look at the stigmatization of cannabis, you really want to look at the players that were driving that.
Even there, I keep coming back to that, right? Because we've looked at, what the reasons for the stigmatization or the alienation of cannabis as a product. That's just a convergence of interest. Reality is that the needs are still there, and I think this is what is so important when it comes to looking at what is different between the U.S. market and the European market, is that here the authorities actually took the data seriously and really did take a look at it. And I think the German authorities and the Dutch authorities are they have come the furthest in really taking a serious look at the issue from an engineering standpoint, because that's where you have to do this, because it really is about engineering, and it's not about engineering in a product kind of way. It's about social engineering, and in this regard, what the supranational kind of platforms have made it very, very clear to the international business community. It's said that, all right, well, these are the needs. This is what we see needs to be done. So if you try to see to that, and if you try to satisfy those actual needs, then you're in. Kind of. That's the message. If you read what's been going on, with the UN and with the WHO and with the EMDCCA. So it's all there's a very adult. I like that. It's attractive. There's a very adult kind of attitude towards actually addressing this in a good way here, not to disrupt, because in Europe we're a little bit more cynical in some ways than they are in the US in some ways, where we know that certainly there's a great deal of criminal elements that are certainly making money from this product. But instead of just, looking at it from a moral standpoint, we decided to look at the scientific facts. And the scientific facts have shown us that, all right, well, to a larger part, a lot of this business can be integrated into functional and transparent business, and it doesn't need to be in a kind of gray zone. So for us as a company, that's kind of where we started out. We started looking at needs. We were just me and my partner Louise, and we just happened to be very good at finding things out. So we got tiny little jobs here and there. Could you go talk to the sheriff, down in Jacksonville? Can you find out what the zoning rules for this county is? We need seeds over here. How do we find legal seeds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on where you come in, for us, it was all about function. And when we came into the business, we were trying to understand, well, is this possible to really do? Sorry about that. Is it really possible to do an effective transition of this business? From what was the very raw kind of raw business that was the early American business around 2012, 2013, 14, as they started to open up on the West Coast of the US. So what we found was that yes, it was extremely raw and very simplistic, but at the time, looking at the US and how the US business has kind of evolved, I think that the criticism from corporate level actors in this sphere has been right, because they're really saying it for what it is. Everyone's just running for the quick buck, and no one's really interested in finding out what you need to find out in order to put products on the market with a long lifespan, and really caring for what is the patient, the end user.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the green rush, and particularly we've seen this around products like CBD, where people just ran to the market. You had no way of knowing what you were getting. There was no standards, there was no labeling or consistency in the labeling. And then when we went back and tested some of these products, many of them didn't even contain CBD, despite what
exactly
making a claim on that. So we do need these standards and compliance and testing and all that. But I think one of the challenges is that the systems are in place to make this as complicated as possible, rather than supporting the growth of this industry. For instance, the licensing. Like if you talked about Germany. Look at the licensing in Germany and who got licenses, right? Yeah. How does that support economic development? How does that a bunch of Canadian companies got big licenses. We're starting to see that change a little bit, but the approach is wrong, because they're not looking at this from an economic development standpoint of job creation and taxation.
No, they're looking to attract a quick profit, and realistically, you cannot enter a young market and set quick profit goals without that costing somewhere. That's just basic.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about the companies. I'm talking about the governments and the legislation.
No, absolutely. But but here's the difference. I truly believe that there's a very, very big difference in the approaches towards the product. If we look at Germany, you see that there is an understanding that this is an actual. This really is kind of a commodity. It's in a gray zone. It used to be a commodity. It needs to be probably a commodity. Somehow, find a format with where that works again. Because we have to have quality class systems. That's just how it is. That's how we do it with every other commodity. We need to do that. But at the same time, there's a big issue with people confusing moral indignation for politics, and these are not the same things, and they should not be confused. In this case, one needs to look at what are the actual needs, and the difference between this and a product like, and this is important because we've come across, places where we've been told by people in government that they have perceived the product as, well, we think this should be rather in, say, alcohol and tobacco. And we've told them, well, that is not the reality of it, because the data that has been brought forth, by the WHO in 2018, and then publicly published in 2019, clearly specifies that this is a medical product. Everything about it. And the interesting part is now we still have this idea where we make these distinctions. They say there's recreational use and a medical use. But looking at the data makes it pretty specific that all use is medical use. It's a degree, of course. There's a difference in therapeutic, say outcomes in a person who just needs to relax on a Friday or Saturday night, or someone who has chronic pain. But it is still a medical response that gives the non-chronic person a symptom relief, because he gets stress relief.
But when we think of medicinal, what we want is evidence-based, right? We want to make sure that the product has gone through some form of trial, that the claims that are being made as to the efficacy towards whatever whatever problem is being addressed, whether it be pain management, something like that, that there's been studies that we know that indeed it does have this effect.
Yep.
And, we can expect these types of outcomes. We understand what the potential side effects could be. Right? We want, if it's going to be a medicinal product, we want it to be evidence-based, right? And that is the only way that your doctor is going to prescribe it. Is if there are trials that have supported the claims, right? Because one of the challenges that we've seen, and again, I'm going to fall back to the CBD products, is in order to go with the rush of making lots of money, people just went out and made all kinds of outrageous claims about what the CBD could do. According to the claims, it pretty much can do anything and everything. And yet none of that's been supported by any sort of trials or any sort of clinical data.
No one wants to put the money in there.
Well, but the reality is, there is a difference between recreational and medicinal, because with medicinal you need evidence. If you are going to
in this regard, absolutely. In this regard, I'm completely in agreement. I also think that this should be an incentive to actually put this whole thing, put your money where your mouth is. That if we're looking at companies like some of these companies out there, they're grossing $150 million in less than 6 months. You can easily put, $2 of those $1 million into clinical trials. And if you don't do that, that's a signal that you're actually out to disrupt the market. You're just out to maintain an unstable situation and to continue to milk that unstable situation until there comes the point where you cannot milk it anymore. And this is what there's 4 companies in the U.S. that are doing this, mainly. What their purposes are and what their strategic reasons, God knows. Who knows?
Well, the reasons are to make money, but anyone who has any experience in drug development knows this is a slow, arduous process, which is tremendously expensive.
Yes,
the average timeline to bring a drug to market is 10 years.
10 years. 10 years, $1 billion.
$2 billion, price tag.
Yeah.
So, to go through the different trials, to go through the different stages, this is a process. And, you have to, if you're going to go through a medicinal and make medicinal claims, then you have to, be in it for the long haul.
Yes. and again, it's seeing it for what it was. I feel like for us, it's grown on us because we got into this because we got a tip. I have a terrible back injury, and I got a tip about CBD, and it turned out that wow, this stuff worked for me. So oh, cool. So I kind of hung around, and I figured, well, I'll just see what this really is, because like I said, early 2012, 13, there we were looking at it, and it really didn't feel. How do we format this so we can reach your grandma, or who wants to go to the pharmacy and who has a bad hip or something, because that's ultimately where this needs to go. So just understanding the whole culture around it, and I think more than anything, it's been an incredible ride to see how much with cannabis is mere social drama, cultural drama, and also I'd say somewhat, psychosocial, a bit pathological, because it's holding on to lifestyle surrounding this product, which is merely a medical product. It's no more dramatic than aspirin when it comes down to it. So aspirin kill you too. So and cannabis can't do that. So it's less dramatic.
It's been stigmatized for years, so that's not going to go away overnight.
No, it's not. It's not, definitely. But I think what we're seeing in Europe is a de-dramatization of a de-romanticization of the whole issue. I kind of, it deflating it a little bit. And I think that's good. I think one of the things that I see that I think is really good about the German and the Dutch, government discussion is that there's an actual awareness of the fact that we really need to work as an entire European market to really, really bring down prices on biomaterial in such a way that it correlates with the black market. And if we don't do that, we're all in agreement that if we don't do that, we will lose the market to the black market. It's a fact. And again, this is an actual open understanding. This is something that we all know this. It's a fact. Now, everyone are not, in agreement on this. Some people are still, they're in strategies where they're considering, well, maybe we'll just max this as long as we can. And considering the way the European market is, and no one can go alone. That's not how Europe works. You have to be very, very one step at a time and very diplomatic about everything, because no one walks alone. We don't.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to argue against that, right? Because if you price it at a point where it's just ridiculous, of course people are going to continue to go to the black market. But there's other challenges. You speak to Germany, and if you look at Germany, there are so many different jurisdictions that all have different rules when it comes to CBD and cannabis.
Yep.
So it's not even a German market. There's individual markets within Germany that aren't consistent, and that aren't, what you can do in Berlin is different than what you can do in Munich.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yes.
And so, but they haven't even resolved that. So we don't have that consistency. We don't have that alignment, and then you multiply that by 28 member states. That is a really difficult challenge to overcome.
Yeah.
Because we can't even manage it in a single country like Germany.
No. What we've done is we've gone down to the basics and just address the issue for what it is: medical compounds, pharmacology, and we've done the deep dive into the pharmacology, into the regulatory, just the framework. And that's how we built everything. So that's how the products that we're now developing for market, they're not going to be on market for at least 4 years. So we have about, well, who knows? Maybe we're lucky. Maybe they're nice. Who knows? But we believe it's realistic with 4 years, and that's just from what we have understood. That, well, this is how the regulatory reality has addressed the issue. And it says,
And
well,
I would say,
yeah.
I applaud you for going that route, because that's the route that we need to go. But in the meantime, we have other, entrants in the market who aren't so concerned.
Absolutely,
like said,
absolutely.
And then, I don't know, have you run into Delta 8 and Kratom? I tend to bring that up all the time, but these are people that have clearly found a workaround, and are just willing to exploit that for a quick buck.
Well, there's always going to be there's always going to be various business models, and they always some succeed, some don't succeed. Some business models are built to fail quickly, and to really maximize the profit you make during that time window that you're building for. It's up to each and every one how they build their own companies, and the people who get involved with that. I really think so.
Yeah, but the challenge is that, as we're trying to destigmatize the plant, as we're trying to develop credibility and standards, these other players who aren't so concerned about all that are tainting the market, because they're bringing in products,
Well, if you look at it, if we look at it from a conflict perspective, yes, one could say that it's tainting the market. If you look at it from a process kind of perspective, a kind of, I don't know, dynamic capitalist kind of perspective, then they're not so much hurting the market as simply doing what that group of entrepreneurs always do in any kind of new market. History also shows that most of them are going to be gone within 10 years. That's just a historic fact. And the companies that really will be there in those 10 years are going to be a couple of those companies that will survive and will have adapted their business model to a steadier business model. And it'll be the companies who have had, more of a long-term build up coming from where they came from. So it's all about, I would say that this is like the third or fourth generation of a legal modern segment regarding cannabis. And I honestly don't think that, here's one example. What we do with this company really, really matters for all these other little companies, because we bring value to their business, and we help people get better at what they do, and we can help people maneuver in the landscape and to excel and to understanding the market for what it is. And truly, if you care about your market, you want to get involved in it, and you want to get to know as many people as you can in it. And you try to see what it is, because if you see the market for what it is, you understand that this is a fantastic thing that you've been given. You're a part of something truly wonderful. Now, sure, you can run business from a sheer capitalist point of view, but in the end, that always kind of never really works out so well. Because it ends up, affecting products, and this ends up affecting more than anything the end user.
It's not so much that it's from the capitalist perspective, because if you invest in your company and build a company over time so that you can last for a long time, that's capitalistic. That's fine.
Absolutely.
These are people who are trying to turn a quick buck. They are at best, working loopholes in the system that they've managed to figure out. But what this comes down to, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, was if grandma goes in and wants to buy a product, right, and this is her first experience, and she buys a questionable product that now is available because of some loophole, and that hasn't been tested, that has no sort of standards applied to it, that the labeling is either wrong or misleading, especially when it comes to medical claims, she will take that information and say, oh, look, this, this is a bad industry because look what they've done to me. And this is at a time when we are trying to, destigmatize the industry and say this is a legitimate medical product. This has legitimate medical needs. And so, I would push back that, they're not being capitalists, they're opportunistic. and
Yes.
they're
Well,
still
yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with capitalism.
I don't have to say
There's
good.
a difference between that and exploiting people, right?
I agree. I completely agree. Like I said, because that's really where it's at. That is where it lands. Why we do it? You want to. I want my family, my friends to be comfortable and safe. It's that simple. I've traveled for about 30 years with like 150 travel days, with my previous job. My family's not in, some village up in the north of Sweden, and that's it. My family happens to be global after that amount of time and, working around the world. This is a question of organization. Someone asked me a while ago, we'll say, well, what about the cartels? What about all these drug cartels, etc.? I can't help it. These cartels and these large so-called criminal, companies are corporations. They're corporations. It is a side of capitalism. I'm not saying it's a great side, but it is a side.
But that's why it's so important that the governments take a leading role.
Absolutely.
That the governments don't try to tax it to death so that it becomes, outpriced, and that, that there's some, social equity so that people can get into the industry without having, one of the problems with the industry is this just an expensive industry to get into.
Very. I think
that eliminates who can participate.
Yes.
And then, the cartels have plenty of money. They can participate. So we need to look at sort of social equity programs as to why we're not supporting smaller entrepreneurs and startup companies.
Yes.
So that we can legitimize this and that we can produce a product that is reasonably priced, that is safe, so that folks don't have to revert back to the black market.
But the thing is, it doesn't need to be a black market. There's no place for it anymore. It causes social destabilization. It's not good. And quite frankly, it is merely a product, and it is a product that is, when you look at it, it comes off as initially as kind of a commodity. But then you look at the realities. We have 200 million people who daily consume this product. 200 million people who will daily, regardless of what consequences, will consume this product every day. That's a sign of an intrinsic product. That's a product that means more to these people than risk of punishment, than risk of even losing maybe health or life. So this is not rational. It can't be stopped by legislation. It needs to instead be cared for and opened.
But the challenge as it relates back to the black market is even in areas where there is adult use, beyond medicinal, there's even adult use allowed, right? So you'd say, oh, well, it's an open market. People should now be able to go to legitimate places. But what we look is there's a tax applied, a luxury tax or a sin tax applied, at 30%, or there's all kinds of other things that make it difficult for it to compete. In order for the cartels to go away, you have to offer competing product.
No, absolutely. If you're going to be completely open about it, the only way to make the cartels go away, if you would have that as a goal, would be to invite them. That would be the only way to fully integrate and to get rid of the problem that exists surrounding these products. And to do that, well, the only thing that stands in the way for that is knowledge. It sounds kind of rough, but over these years, the people that we've sat down and talked to, even with people who are in the criminal side of the business, just to understand how they work and how their reality is, well, it very much is a question of knowledge framework and understanding of, well, how do you even start a business? How does even tax regulation work? What is, to a large part of the people who have kind of reside within the gray and the black markets, they're kind of locked out, and they build, and this is what the entire deal with stop the whole idea about the Leave No One Behind program, the sustainability agenda, the idea surrounding the Agenda 2030, etc., is what this is all about. Because we're looking at what has happened is that cannabis regulation and attitudes have become so toxic that they really are separating society in a way that's kind of on, right on the verge to what Nazis were doing, and we don't see that because we're in this, people have their jobs and we have our safety and security and we live our lives nicely, but not everyone has that. In reality, we're talking about maybe 10% of the entire population who are directly affected, by this in a way where detrimentally, undermines their capacity for having a good quality life, and to getting access to education, to getting access to, even a good, to start a company, you might need a loan. Many countries you can't even get a loan if you do not have that education, or if you say have a sentence, etc. So it's a whole situation that has just undermined social function and has really done a number on democracy. So I mean, it really is. It's a lot bigger than cannabis.
and let's go back to Europe. One of my beliefs is that we need one of the big countries to embrace this, and I think we're looking at Germany.
Yes.
So what do you believe that once Germany fully embraces this, whether it be adult use or medicinal, what have you, that the other countries in the EU will start to come on board?
God, I have no idea. I honestly don't right now. I wish I do. The way I see it, I really think that Germany is going to, pick up the torch in a good way. I believe that within 5 years, there will be a position where people will be able to grow maybe, 3 or 4 plants themselves, adults. And I think there'll probably be some kind of regulation for artisanal grow, in small scale. And I think there will be provisions set up around and frameworks set up around any kind of commercial product, just the way that they're doing it now. I honestly believe that very much with the extremely high costs and the complications that have been around it has been there to kind of mitigate it going too fast. And I really think that you will find most of these products in pharmacies, German pharmacies, in about 5 years. There'll be special pharmacies. There's a couple of companies working with that right now, and they'll be in all well-sorted pharmacies. I also believe that there will be, in some states, more artisanal shops where you can maybe buy some special brands or that are made in under other provisions.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that as sort of, like the craft beer model, where if you want to have an organically, if you are a consumer and you want to have an organically grown product, you can seek that out. It won't be the mass produced product. It won't be a medicinal product because none of that would qualify for the GMP. But, there'll be, like you said, there'll be artisanal, avenues for, if I want something locally grown or I want something organically grown, I think that will exist. Unfortunately, I think that will be a relatively small percentage of the overall market.
Looking at it, I don't see the market. I don't see the product going away. As is right now, it seems like European medical agency is setting their foot down in regards of especially CBD, and they've said that we want synthetic CBDs if you're gonna be putting these out into the pharmacies. And so and this isn't settled yet. We'll see how this all plays out. 5 years ago, unthinkable in the cannabis industry. And now the discussion is totally different. We're seeing a new discussion that really does take the patient finally as the first interest, the first person of interest in the whole issue. Up until now, it's been the business talking about how the business could make money. Rather than see to how can we solve the needs and realities and the unmet needs of the patients, and who are the patients? What are the actual needs? I mean, I think more than anything that has been the big deal. And in Germany, there has been since 2015 a mountain is coming of studies out of there, and this leads on as well. See, everything kind of opens up new venues and kind of we see that, all right, there's enough material here to actually support a next level clinical study. Or right over here with this one, we see that, okay, so there's enough indication here to actually pull this one through. So because it's all about statistic relevance, and it really is the same thing that as when you're working with developing any kind of other drug, so it's a question of holding on to tight regimens in how you shape your product. And this is very much to do with understanding legal and understanding pharmacology. And this is something we can't do this alone. Coming from direct from, say, county or college. I got this idea, I'm going to start a cannabis company. It takes a lot more than that. And this is the reason why we're seeing so much Ivy League CEOs coming up in these kind of companies, because it is that type of understanding of corporate landscape that you need to have.
Yeah,
you need to understand.
That we talk about that all the time, where you can have a great idea, but in order, what really comes down to it is, can you execute? And execution is about, can you raise money, right? Do the investors believe that you have a track record that would substantiate giving you a couple $1 million to try? Right. A lot of times what happens is we'll see the R&D types come out of academia, but they've never taken a product to market. They've never, branded a product. So they have great ideas, and we're not discounting those ideas, but the reality is they're not going to build companies because they don't have the experience. So you need, as you suggested, that business people who've been there, done that, maybe in other fields or in other industries, but at least somebody who's brought a product to market, someone who knows how to raise venture capital and equity and understands what all that means. So you're right. It's not just about having a really good idea and like, oh, I'm going to start a company, because as you need to fund it, which is a lot of work. You need to understand how to take a product to market. You need to understand how to evaluate the market, how to position your company in the market. So it's more than a good idea. Yes, sadly.
Yeah. Well, again, this is, and this is something I feel good about. I think that, well, great. We're a couple of companies now that have done this detective work of figuring all these really complex things out. We will be needing all these great people working with us, and we're going to have to teach them what we've learned. And as we do this, also there's going to be new companies and new ambition and new talent going to be showing up and say that, well, okay, we're willing, we'll learn, we'll just let us in here and we'll do it, And that's I'm really happy about it. I feel it's kind of cool that this group of companies have kind of taken a different direction than the Canadians and the North Americans, I think. I like that.
I guess my response to that would be is, what we need to do though is to provide an ecosystem that supports these types of companies, right? Because that ecosystem doesn't exist currently in that format, because the folks that want to enter this market in a legitimate way, The only way to enter these markets in a legitimate way is to be a big player, because then you have the bandwidth and the capital to look 4 or 5 years down the road. The average entrepreneur cannot self-fund, and I'm sure you can attest this, how difficult it is to self-fund for 10 years to get a product.
Oh yes.
Right. So that eliminates, we need to create an ecosystem, and we need to create a landscape for these opportunities for different people within the industry to survive the startup process. Absolutely.
I think we're building a market. I don't think a market is something that boom, suddenly there's a market and then it's there. My experience is that the market is something that is a constant. And if you enter the market, regardless of what it is that you're bringing to that market, you're gonna be in for change. For as long as you will be in that market, because market means change. It really does. It's volatility creates. It brings interest. It brings capital. It brings ideas. It brings innovation, fears, possibilities. So that's just.
But the market's supposed to be open to everyone, not just the few players that have enough money.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And I said that's kind of why I like being able to kind of stepping into this thing like this, because when we first started out, 10 years ago, it wasn't a position where people would say, well, that's kind of impossible because it's so much work. And thank God we had done that much, large scale structural work with stuff that we'd done before. So it didn't look impossible. It looked like, well, that's a lot of work. It's taken about 2 years longer than I thought. All in all, it's taken about, 2 years longer than I did think. But actually, it would never have been possible if we wouldn't have worked internationally with developing and bringing products to market and really understanding the whole product journey and the whole process. Because without that, you can't possibly make a strong analysis of what the cannabis business is. Because it looks initially too abstract. Because there's so much, like I said, so much cultural and social drama going on around it that it just really diffuses the reality.
I think the also thing which is confusing is when people think about the cannabis business, they think, especially on the legal side, they think about the dispensary, right? Yeah. And there's just so much more layers to the industry, right? Because any industry means that you have service providers who support it, you have distributors, you have extractors, you have growers. So I mean, this is, and I'm sorry, I'm saying this as many times as I have, this is an ecosystem, right?
Yes, it is.
So when people think about the industry, what they think about is the seller, right? Who the retailer or the seller, but there's so much more that we need to support in order for all that to happen.
Yeah.
What do you think the next step is? How do we continue to move this forward? And especially how do we create opportunities so that people can enter this business legitimately?
Yes.
And move forward.
We need brains. I'm not kidding around. We need more smart people in this business. Really. If you're watching this and you're from any of the larger universities and you're looking at a business degree.
Thank you for watching.
Yes, and thank you. Just this is you're in the right place. Pursue it. We really need organized, smart people with an understanding that this is a legitimate market. And the more good people we get here, the better this business is going to develop. Because it comes down to it, it originates with some fantastic people all over the world. Sure, there's some other people as well, but the core of what became even the criminal side is on the nicer side of things in reality when one goes out into the bush and says hi to people. And I think this is something that speaks good for the entire business. At core, it's about wanting other people well. You know, anyone you've met, we've met, you know, in the US, South America, and outside in, you know, in Europe, who have, you know, worked with this product, be it legal or illegal. Most of them are nice people. The one thing that we need more of is education. Smart people, come on! This is fun. It's a good place. Nice people. So, yeah.
Peter, we very much appreciate your insights and spending time with us today. If folks want to learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
They can find the old, very ugly homepage at svenskaverde.com.
We'll put the link below in case you didn't get all that.
Yeah, it sounds like, oh. Anyway, and there you can have a little bit of look. In a couple of weeks, there will be a finer presentation.
Well, we look forward to that. Again, we appreciate your time very much. And we look for great things, and hopefully we can have this discussion again in about 1 or 2 years and we can see how far we've come.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. It was a great discussion and great conversation. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.